one of the problems is that every decision really does need to make other decisions as well. So if you want to get something new, you need to decide what you're going to scrap. And as the expression goes, the hardest thing is not to get a new idea into the military mind, but the old idea out.
Johnson, Truss, Sunak, Starmer, Burnham. The occupant of number 10 may change, but warm words about Ukraine remain the same. Andy Burnham is on his first visit to Ukraine this morning, showing his support for Volodymyr Zelensky's fight against Russia. We've also learnt the UK is giving Ukraine the blueprints for long-range missiles. But the war has gone on for 6 years now and seems stuck in a stalemate. So can it ever be unstuck? We can speak now to Conservative MP and former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat. He served in both the 2003 Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. Good morning.
Morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I hope you are too. We had the Minister, Luke Pollard, on the programme this morning talking about the blueprints that the UK is handing over and the difference that they will make. Is it a welcome step?
Look, I think it's very welcome that Britain is maintaining its position of standing alongside Ukraine. Everybody from His Majesty the King down has made it very clear that we do stand with Ukraine. And today, actually, one of the most important things is that Ukraine stands with us, because they are actually at the forefront of drone warfare. They're the ones who have learnt, sadly, in the hardest way possible, how to defend themselves and how to use drones effectively. And so we are learning from them. So this is now a moment of mutual exchange. We're supporting them, yes, with their Storm Shadow and various other different forms of defence, but they are also supporting us. And I'm very glad that that alliance is proving strong.
There is a sort of question mark over the speed, though. Mikhailo Fedorov, the former Ukrainian defence minister, has said that actually, while he welcomes the UK's commitment, things are often delayed by bureaucracy and red tape. And it's something that we've heard repeated by people who work in defence in this country, who want to get new innovations on the books with the MOD, or who want to secure a meeting, for example. How much of a problem is that in your experience?
Yeah, it's a real problem, and one of the problems is that every decision really does need to make other decisions as well. So if you want to get something new, you need to decide what you're going to scrap. And as the expression goes, the hardest thing is not to get a new idea into the military mind, but the old idea out. And one of the challenges we've had is we just haven't had enough money. Now, you know, I've been arguing that we need to spend more on defence, not just for a few months, but actually for many years. And I'm very glad that John Healey took the principal decision to resign over that under Keir Starmer, but now seems to be delaying the increase until the spending round in April, May next year. Now, it's pretty extraordinary that he's now the Chancellor. He's now got the opportunity to make the decision in the budget that prioritises defence and makes, yes, tough decisions on things like aid and welfare and whatever else we'll need to ease off in order to pay for it. But he's delaying it again, and we just can't afford these delays. Russia isn't delaying, Iran isn't delaying, and Britain shouldn't delay.
You're talking about John Healey there, who's now the Chancellor. Do you have faith in Andy Burnham on the world stage? I mean, this is his first visit to Ukraine since coming into office as Prime Minister. He's made his career in domestic politics, I think that's fair to say. Do you think he gets it? Do you think he sees the urgency and the need to go faster on this stuff?
Look, I want every Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to do well on the world stage, because I want Britain to do well on the world stage. I want to see us for who we are, a nation that is strong internationally, that has amazing resources at home and has some brilliant people coming up with fantastic ideas and developing them. But what we also need to see is we need to see the commitment behind it. And at the moment, what Andy's done, I'm very glad that he's gone to Ukraine for their Independence Day today. I think it's the right thing to do. But what I'd also like to see him do is make sure we have resilience at home, because it's not enough to posture abroad if you're not protecting the UK. And we've seen in recent days that report about the Iranian attack on a power plant, that countries like Iran, like Russia, are already testing our defences. This isn't the first time that they're doing it, but this is what they're doing right now. And we need to make absolutely certain that we are safe. And at the moment, we need to see the intelligence agencies prioritising cybersecurity for our power plants, our water and other things. And we need to be standing with our European partners against the kind of sabotage and murder we've seen coming out of Russia, not just for a few years, but for a few decades.
Well, you mentioned cybersecurity. There's a question this morning about David Lammy, who handed over a fake number for Donald Trump's Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. He didn't do it intentionally, of course. He believed it was Susie Wiles. But it turns out that that was actually a Russian cyber warfare unit behind that fake number, which was given to the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, who did then engage with whoever was on the other end of this phone number. How concerned should we be that that unit was able to get in touch with David Lammy and convince him to hand over that kind of information to the Prime Minister? I mean, should there be an investigation? The Minister this morning said that there won't be.
Well, I'm pretty astonished, frankly. Not only, I mean, David isn't in government, so I don't know why he decided to do that, and it strikes me as particularly unwise, but that's David's decision. What I think is much more surprising is that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, whose phone isn't just a personal phone, but is effectively the sort of the front door for all of us and for our government, wasn't checked by the various different intelligence agencies and just diplomats. Why did nobody ask our fantastic ambassador in Washington what the correct number was? Why was he relying on a friend to pass on a number? We do pay diplomats around the world in order to make sure we have good links and make sure that we have proper connections. This strikes me as an extremely cavalier way of operating in a world where we know that Russia and Iran and other people are trying to distort and divide us.
Finally, 2 former Home Secretaries have called for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to be given a limited and temporary security package until it's clear what their long-term plans in the UK are. Lord Blunkett said there was a happy medium in which their family could be given a medium level of protection. You used to be Security Minister yourself. Would you agree with that assessment?
Look, I really, forgive me, this isn't a political matter, it's a private matter for the royal family. I have very little interest in it. All I'd say is that RAVEC, the organisation that was established many years ago in order to assess who needs security, when and why, will take their responsibilities seriously, I'm sure, and they will come up with an appropriate recommendation. I mean, frankly, the biggest problem we've got is we don't have enough police officers and we don't have enough armed police officers for the whole of the United Kingdom. I'd like to see that increased, but who gets what where, it's not really a matter for politicians, and it shouldn't be.
Tom Tugendhat, former Security Minister, Conservative MP, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And so through today, we'll be listening out for what Andy Burnham says during his visit to Ukraine. Also, how he chairs this meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which I read this morning Emmanuel Macron will not be at in person. He'll be dialing in. And Friedrich Merz of Germany will be doing the same thing because of kind of domestic stuff that they've got going on. So what tone does he strike? How does he bring international leaders with him as the sort of chairperson, I suppose, of the Coalition of the Willing? How does he perform in that sort of setting? Does the vibes of the vibes of Andy Burnham carry through into that sort of diplomatic effort, I wonder? So lots of reporting on that on Times Radio for you through today. Labour's Defence Minister Luke Pollard told us an hour ago that Russian threat wouldn't stop the UK supporting Ukraine. We've learned today that the UK is giving Ukraine blueprints to help them build missiles that can hit deep into Russian territory. The Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, is in Kyiv this morning. He'll chair a meeting of leaders from 34 countries that support Ukraine, that group that is known as the Coalition of the Willing. Matthew Savill's the Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI. Matthew, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for speaking to us. When it comes to the UK's level of support for Ukraine over the duration of this conflict, how does the access of these blueprints, how does that fit into the picture of support as far as you're concerned?
I think it's about support for the medium to the long term. This is probably not going to be that quick in terms of setting up a brand new production facility for new missiles, but it is helping the Ukrainians continue to develop their own pretty spectacular defence industry, and is in putting in place arrangements to allow them to develop new weapons in the future. And so I think, along with the French, a lot of this is about, if you like, showing support for Ukraine, and that's why they've linked it to the Coalition of the Willing meeting as well.
Does it seem like a baby step, really, to you? What could the UK and other countries that support Ukraine do if they really wanted to help Ukraine beat Russia? As we heard from a former advisor to the Defence Ministry, he says they want it to make that they want allies to make it impossible for Russia to fight. What would achieve that?
Well, I mean, that would be a comprehensive approach in terms of sanctions, undercutting Russian defense industry, preventing components that make their way into Russian weapons, which still come from the West in some cases, but they would also have to tackle the supply of electronics from, for example, China. They could provide more weapons in the short term. This is, I think, a useful step in terms of supporting Ukrainian development of their own weapons. So, in the first instance, producing Scalp, as it's called in the French military use, but probably at some point adapting their own weapons, of which they're also developing many.
We were speaking to Luke Pollard an hour ago, and Kate was asking him about whether Britain would be involved in targeting decisions as a result of all of this. What would be your analysis of that? Where does the UK's involvement stop, I suppose? Is it handing over the blueprints and that's it, or does support continue?
No, I think that there's plenty of reporting about the provision of information from Western sources. I think one of the ironies has been that while the US under Donald Trump has obviously been very mercurial in terms of its support, the US reportedly provides a lot of intelligence. There is a need to be able to produce geospatial information, so very accurate mapping that is used in the programming of the missiles. So I think there'll be a question there, can the Ukrainians duplicate some of that information? Because that means that, for example, the US can't prevent their use because they don't pass on that data. So there's a lot that goes into using weapons like this, and I suspect the Ukrainians will be wanting to develop their own capabilities across the board.
It seems, Matthew, as though there is consensus in politics about taking on the Russians on behalf of Ukraine and supporting Ukraine to do that. But to what extent do we need to be considering the possibility that Russia could cause serious harm to the UK? And if that happens, have the politicians been paying attention to that threat?
Well, a lot of that activity, covert action by Russia in Europe, which has been going on for a long time, so-called shadow warfare, I think the government is already looking at it and aware of it, alongside a number of other countries. Bits of the UK government have talked about hostile state activity or state threats for some time now. I think the challenge is, one, how do they actually deter that? Rather than just simply expose it and talk about it, and what role does the private sector and the public have in that debate? Because a lot of that is about public awareness. A lot of it is about companies and businesses actually providing their own security or having good security awareness. And then it is about, I think, calmly explaining the level of threat to people, because otherwise we yo-yo between underplaying the threat or implying that we're under imminent threat of conventional attack, and the truth is somewhere in between.
And with that in mind, when we consider the use of Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles, the UK versus French equivalent, there's a feeling, isn't there, that actually these are going out of fashion a bit in the UK. They're not a part of the defence investment plan. They are expensive, and it's been decided that they are not where money should be spent when it comes to the UK's investment. What should we, I suppose, consider about that when this is what we're allowing the Ukrainians access to, but we don't want them for ourselves going forward?
Well, we actually do want replacements for them. We have a program with the French called Stratus, which has 2 different missile types in development at the moment. And that is because what the Defence Investment Plan, the Strategic Defence Review, talked about is a high-low mix, as it is known, which is that you do need some very sophisticated weapons that are expensive for a variety of reasons, but you also need the mass output of decent, good enough firepower. And that's why we're seeing this interest in drones, which in many cases are cheap guided missiles or flying bombs. And the Ukrainians themselves, who have pioneered drone warfare, are also investing in their own cruise and ballistic missiles. So it's not that these missiles are going out of fashion, it's that they are finding a different role in the overall force.
Matthew, it's good to speak to you this morning. Thank you. Matthew Savill there, the Director of Military Sciences at RUSI.
It's a really interesting debate about the UK's support for Ukraine. There are lots of you messaging in this morning supportive of what the UK is doing, but the tone of the messages, I think, is a question mark for this government. How you balance off some of the very difficult decisions that are set to be made in the budget this year when it comes to funding and what taxpayers are asked to put their money behind. And of course, we've got John Healey, who used to be Defence Secretary, now in the top job at the Treasury. He who argued for more funding, a clearer path to the significant increase in funding that the UK has pledged in terms of its global commitments. How much of that will Andy Burnham be willing to take on, be willing to run with? And might this visit to Ukraine, his first visit to Ukraine on a really significant day for Ukrainians, might that maybe change, I suppose, how he feels about it? I think there have been some people who said, he's not been driven by foreign policy. He's made his political career in domestic politics. That is evidently what drives him. Will visiting Ukraine and meeting with Zelensky maybe change his own priorities? And is that the right way to go?